Welcome, people, to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, and we have arrived to the very last episode of 2020. So for those who've been rocking with us from day one, episode 1 to now episode 53. Wow, 53 episodes. Man, we thank you. And we hope that you continue to tune in with us as we go into 2021. Tonight's guest is a good friend of mine who I've come to really love and just respect over the past month through our interaction with Teachers for Good Trouble. And he is somebody who, if you are not following the insightful teacher on Instagram Live, you are missing out on life, and you're going to find out why in a few seconds. But just to give you a little bit of background on this brother, he is Brooklyn born, but he teaches out in the Bronx. He's a life coach. He's an abolitionist, a consultant, a motivator, and he's a preacher. Always speaking a word, always vibing, always speaking life into others. And he's going to do that tonight. So without further ado, I want to bring on my good brother, Mr. Rakim Amalu Jenkins. What's up, man?
What's up, man? I appreciate you, bro. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing all right, man. I'm just blessed to be able to wake up and break bread with you and have this dialogue.
I appreciate it. Let's get it.
Yes, sir. So, first question I always like to ask all of my guests is to just tell us what brought you into education and just a little bit about your background and how you were brought up.
Yeah, I think what's important. Thank you. I will be remiss if I didn't mention. I feel education is my purpose, right? Educate people of African descent. I would like to just pay homage to my ancestors. And the principle of today for Kwanzaa is Nia, to make our collective vocation the building, developing of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness, right? And I think that one thing that brought me into education is because I was one of the students who was pretty much marginalized in my school, right? I grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And before I got to the 5th grade, I was seen as a problem child, right? I was in 2 foster cares before I was in 5th grade, right? And I'm gonna just tell you a little bit about my background. My foster mother sent me to like a mental institution. I was I got expelled from the 7th grade. When I was expelled, right? And that summer of the 7th grade, I got picked up on a false arrest and sent to Spofford in the Bronx. Spofford is now locked down. It's now shut down. It was so bad, right? And like literally at every point, I felt like this country tried to bury me. At every point, this society tried to bury me, right? And one of the things, the only teacher I could really think of who supported me was my 5th grade teacher, Mr. Brinson. He really pushed me to really think about the things that were happening to me, right? And he gave me the discipline, he gave me the academic excellence, and this was the first and only Black male teacher I've ever had, right? So forward to when I got in the City College of New York, I started to take sociology and Black studies classes, right? And in my Black studies class, my sophomore year, I only went to college to play basketball, y'all. That's it. I don't really went to college.
Wow.
I went to college to play basketball. That's it. And I dislocated my shoulder my freshman year. So I didn't get my scholarship, my basketball scholarship renewed. I was on a scholarship upstate in Utica, where I played basketball at. My goal was to go overseas, play basketball, come back home, right, and try to make the NBA. Like all, they say, like Jay-Z says, hoop dreams deflate like a true fiend's weight, right?
Right.
And when I went to City College, I stumbled along Black Studies, right? And my the professor, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, the first day I walked in there, he said, "You're born to win, but programmed to fail." He said, "You're born to win, but programmed to fail."
Come on now.
And that really, it hit me. Those are the first words. He said, Hotep. Hotep means peace, right?
Right.
And then he came and was like, "You're born to win, but programmed to fail." And then I started to think about my upbringing. And I started to look at it. I used to think these things happened to me, because it was just happenings, right? And that it happened to me because I was Black, right? It was happening when I was Black, but it was a whole system behind it, right? And then I started to see like these things are systematically, I was disfranchised through my youth. So I made it my mission after that, while taking Black Studies, I made it my mission to teach people the history of people of African descent, the history of our culture and our people. Because I felt like if folks just knew their history, if folks just knew their culture, then the things that are happening in my community of Brownsville will not be happening. We can form a collective basis to push by them. So really for me, it was really thinking about Black studies, sociology, my ways of looking at the world was forever changed. And then I came into the Nation of Ndugu and Zinga, my mentor, Dr. Lewis McCoy, and I had the consciousness, but I didn't have the character. So part of my journey in college was raising consciousness and character. And I said, I wanted to build students' consciousness and build their character. And I think that led me into education. So then that led me to apply to Teach for America. I first wanted to be a professor, but now I was like, all right, this is on the way. And my main goal to enter education was to make sure students went to college, put them on the way, liberate them, raise their consciousness, and build their character, and make sure that the future is better than where we are today. So that's kind of how I got into education, really looking at the experiences that I went through. And I learned that your past doesn't dictate your future, but your past makes way, it makes way for you, right? It doesn't dictate your future, but it makes way for you. So yeah.
Wow. And you said Brownsville, Brooklyn.
Brownsville, never ran, right. Never will.
Hold on one second. I'm about to show you something real quick. This is how I know the stars are aligning. Hold on. Check out this book. So this is a book that I've been reading for the past couple of days. You may be familiar with it. You ever read? So I've been reading this.
Oh, Nadia Lopez. Yeah. The Rich, the Brilliant.
And I said, man, I feel like I'm an expert on Brownsville after reading this book.
Yeah.
Once I went to Brownsville, Brooklyn, I just went straight to the book. And I'm actually almost done with it. I'm like 20 pages. There's like 20 pages left that I have to read. But man, much love to Dr. Nadia Lopez. She's a real one. And we need more leaders like her. But I had to just put that Brownsville plug in there because you mentioned it. But going back to what you said about we were born great, but we were programmed to fail. Yeah. That goes back to our history, as you mentioned, because we come from greatness. Yeah. We think about the ancient Cometians, built the pyramids, and invented mathematics. I'm a math teacher, so like you got to speak about Kemet. And their contributions, right?
I have a book up here called two books, right? Stolen Legacy, right? That most folks by George James, right? Most folks don't understand that most of European civilization is built over ancient Kemet, which is Egypt. Matter of fact, my name Rakim comes from Egypt, right? Ra, Ra, the sun god, Kim, or Kemet, right? The sun, those who brings light to the black land, those who comes to free the black land. So it's really like that, named after the rapper, right? When he said, think of that master plan. But when you think of a master plan, All you have to do is look at history, and the master plan was already written, right? Where in Egypt they had schools of knowledge, right? They studied it was a study of the universe, right? And when we think of studies of the universe, right, most folks look at the concept of the university. That came from ancient Kemet, right? When we say the studies of the universe, that came from ancient Kemet. So when I think of the pyramids of Giza and how they mathematically align with the solar systems, like the solar systems, and when I think of the Dogon people who had invisible sight and looked at Sirius B, right? They could see the Sirius B star without the telescope, right? These are mathematical and science. Like I tell my students, right? The first mathematician was Imhotep, right? A black person who looked like you and I. But how come you're not taught about that in school? How come you're not taught about the founder of architecture? Really, the founder of the pyramids in the architecture, a medicine man, right? Most of the medicine that we have now comes from Imhotep. When we think about the Hippocratic Oath, right? Hippocrates, right? Who's like a hypocrite. He even says in Hippocratic Oath that I lend all my knowledge down to Imhotep, right? Who created a whole syllabus, a whole thing for medicine and herbs that you can use. So when I think about the knowledge of our ancestors, right, and the knowledge that was present, that knowledge is also present in our DNA, right? And thinking about Kwanzaa and thinking about the purpose, it gives us a good opportunity to go back and fetch it. Right, to go back, stand Kofor, go back and fetch it, right? And that's what I had to go do. That's what I went. But I know that I was lucky. Like I was lucky. Like I tell folks, I'm lucky to be a teacher, right? I'm lucky to be here because I'm lucky, but it's written in the stars, right? And I think that we have to start we have to change our consciousness and our mindset. My mentor, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, he always said he talked about pyramid consciousness, right?
Okay.
And we talk about the ancient city of Kemet, the three pyramids of Giza. He talked about pyramid consciousness, right? And he said we were born. You're born to win, but programmed to fail. Your programming is in a European triangle, right? And he called it the upside down triangle, and he called it the 3Ds: domination, destruction, and death. That's what we're born into: domination, destruction, and death. And at the middle of that triangle, in the circle where everything is grounded in, is profit. It's profit. But that's not our way. That's not the way. That's not our way as African people. That's not our way, right? So you really have to ask yourself historically, and I talk about this with my student, how come when we think of how did 10% of the world population take over and rule over the 90%? When we think of BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, people of color, we are 90% of the world population. But there was this 10% of the population, right? When I'm talking about a structure and systems, when I'm talking about the system of white supremacy that ruled through domination, destruction, and death, all for profit, all for capitalism, right? Right. But we, as people of the sun, we need to put ourselves, right, into what he called the pyramid consciousness, the African triangle, right? When we think of, it's called the 3 C's: community, collective, and communal, right? Communal, community, and collective, right? And at the center of spirituality. So when we look at concepts called the CAPS BIP, when we look at concepts, analyses, principles, and systems, right? We look at concepts, analyses, processes, and systems. We have to look at our values, interests, and principles. Are your values rooted in white supremacy, domination, destruction, and death? Are your interests rooted in white supremacy in terms of profit? Are your principles rooted in domination, destruction, and death, all sense of about profit, right? Or are your values, interests, and principles, right, centered in African spirituality? When we think of the concepts of the Dogon people, when we think of the concepts of abolition, when we think of the concepts of the universe, when we analyze these things, when we work through these systems, it has to be rooted in spirituality. It has to be rooted in spirituality. And I think most of us are rooting our understandings of the world, inside of that upside down triangle, based off of white supremacy. And we have to, and I think one thing we're doing in education is moving against that white supremacist practices, right? And that's why I'm here, and that's what we have to do. We have to literally move people. Just not it's all people for African descent, but other folks too, right? Move them into this consciousness that centers collective effort over individualism.
Wow. Yeah. And that is so true, man. But let's stay with purpose for a second, because this is what we're talking about today. And honestly, I have a whole bunch of questions, but I like the flow of thought that we're going down right now. So I want to stay on this path. So we talk about purpose. I want to just put the focus back on you for a second, because for somebody who came from such dire circumstances to get to where you are now, I just have to ask, man.
Kwame, I don't know if it's you, but you're breaking up a little bit. So I'm gonna take a stab. I think he was gonna ask me about in terms of like being from being from Brownsville, right, and how I moved through the circumstances, right? So I'm gonna take a stab. I think he was gonna ask me about in terms of like being from, and I think for me, being from Brownsville in particular, I think for me, like we were all sent here for a purpose, right? We were all sent to this plane with a purpose, right? I think a sacred mission, a calling, and I feel like there's someone right now who needs your gift, right? And I think for me, like I always knew that I always knew that I was destined for greatness, but I didn't know what to do. I just had to keep on moving, yo. I just had to keep on moving. And I think one of the things that really helped me was that my mother always encouraged me to read. Like she saw I wanted to read, and she never like stifled my voice, you know? She never stifled my voice. And she just always let me read, always allowed me to like keep moving forward. So my mother is really an inspiration for me, because she always talked about how it is, like what it meant to get an education, right? When we think about it, when I grew up, all these folks were saying, hey, go to college, get an education. They were saying, go to college, get an education. However, they were saying go to college education, but I never saw anyone do it. So that was like my main mission. And Kwame, if you need to, you can hit me in the chats, in the private chat. Kwame, you can ask your questions through YouTube as well, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. This is not the norm, y'all. But
You're good. You're good. You're good.
I'm back.
You're good.
Appreciate you, brother, for keeping that flow of thought going. And you actually answer the question about just what motivate you to just catch this bug to inspire and empower people with your words, because it just comes so natural for you. And that's not something that every person has or is blessed with. So man, I appreciate you for sharing that. But just speaking about just purpose.
Yeah.
One of the things that I learned really over the past month or so, through our interaction with Teachers for Good Trouble, is just the power of community.
Yeah.
And when you think about social media and the craze with, influencers and people with the big followings, it was actually refreshing to see that a collective of teachers, some of whom probably don't even use Instagram that often, made it a point to collaborate with other like-minded teachers to build this collective, this movement, which is still going, and create the impact that it did. So I want to know your thoughts about, first off, the term influencer, which I don't really like, because I'm just an educator. I'm just a normal person, got my shirt and everything. I don't have a mantra or nothing like that. I just wake up every day just like you do, and I just try to spread love and put the shine on others. But what do you believe are the pros and the cons of this space? Because there are some advantages, but we also have to acknowledge that there are some disadvantages as well.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the pros, I'm gonna start with the cons. All
right, let's do it.
I think the cons, right, is that we get talked into the when we think of influencers, we really get talked into thinking about your followers as if the follow account determines your influence, which it doesn't. And I try to tell everyone I talk to is that everyone has influence. Everyone has influence. So when we think about that, right? When I think about it, like I was doing this work before I came to Instagram, like I was doing his work. Before there was an Instagram, I was doing his work, right? Before there was a social media, folks were doing his work. So when we really think about the influence, I would say, what are we influencing? What are we using our influence for? Who is doing the influencing, right? Because I think that the folks that we look to, some of the folks that we look to with the big followings and things of that nature, right? Their influence is wrapped in white supremacy culture, right? And I'll be seeing some influence or so-called influencers. For me, I think for me the right term is thought leader, right? Like for me it's not an influencer, right? I think when we think about influence, right? I think of who are you supporting? What issues are you raising? If you're not influencing and if you're not raising issue on behalf of our people, on behalf of your people, on behalf of the students, on behalf of our student body, like, can we really call you an influence? Right? I'll be seeing some folks, and I'm not knocking folks, having their hustle and stuff like that. But while, folks are like promoting like highlighters and stuff on their page and having like 100,000 followers and, being deemed the great teachers, while folks are really, while Breonna Taylor, right, who was assassinated by police, her 6-year-old son had to go out and carry a sign saying no justice, no peace, right? Like, say her name, right? And when I really think about it, it's like, what are we doing, right? So if I was to really think about influencers, we all have influence, right? We all have a circle of influence. How are you influencing your home? How are you influencing the school? How are you influencing your community? How are you like it's like throwing a rock into a pond and you see the ripples effect, right? Everything that you do influences something else, right? So I think that the cons to it is that we traded how much money we make, how much follows we have. All of these things have been designated as something to move forward to. That's being more sought after than the work, than the actual work. Like, what are you doing? That's my concern. Like, what are you doing? Like, what actions are you taking? And I think that's the issue. But I appreciate, but there is a space for influencers, right? Or who we deem influencers with those large followings, with that capital, with those things, to use their influence in that way, economically or in terms of social influence, to move movement forward. And that's why, and I appreciate Shivy for using his follower account and just his influence in the Teacher Graham place, right, to move Teachers for Good Trouble forward, right? Because in the last 30 days, we've built a national movement, right? We built a national movement for Teachers for Good Trouble, and it was done based off of Shivy's influence, but also my influence, off of Dina's influence, off of yours influence, right? Like, when we all came together, it didn't matter like what follower account. It's like, who was gonna do the work? Are you gonna just talk, or are you gonna put action? So for me, I think the cons of it is that we put, as a people in society, we put our faith more into numbers and followers and money than to the work. And I just want us to start celebrating action and deeds, not just words, followers, and money.
Nah, thank you for saying that, because when I think about just influence, positive influence, it goes back to what you said, the good deeds. Are you giving more than receiving?
Yep.
Are you giving without the intention of reciprocity?
Yep.
Because there are a lot of people who give with the intention of those good deeds being reciprocated back to them.
Yep.
Or with the intention of gaining an incentive. You know, and I know for you, you do IG Lives every day. You don't charge nobody a dime.
I don't.
But that's the love of it. Now, obviously, at some point you're gonna have to, because people tapping in, you know, but the fact that your default is to just do it and to pour into others, that's not something that is common. And the thing that I loved about Teachers for Good Trouble is the fact that we were able to show the different dimensions of activism. Like, not everybody can speak as eloquently as you can and drop bars. Not everybody can get a crowd live like Shivy. Not everybody can do a TikTok video and edutain folks.
That's entertain. I love it. That's good.
It's what it is, edutainment.
It is entertaining.
Point the finger, point the captions, and then doing the whoa, like,
come on, right?
Everybody has their lane, but it's all hey,
right? Over here. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. I love that one.
But everybody has their lane, but within that lane, they're able to have impact.
Yes.
And I think that's important for us to recognize, because just like they say, oh, you know, all Black people are different, we're not monoliths. Well, guess what? we can't look at activism through a monolithic lens.
That's so good.
You know, so yeah, we just can't.
And I appreciate you the most. And one thing I'm getting into it, the written word. The written word, how you be penning pieces, right? I think that is the most. My mentor, Dr. Lewis McCoy, he always talks about the pen being mightier than the sword, the keyboard being mightier than the sword, right?
Mm-hmm.
Folks don't understand, like, everything has an energy. That's why, like, when we talk about cooperative economics or even economics in the end, economics is currency. When you think of currency, the root word of currency is current. Current is energy. So the energy, right? Everything has an energy. And when we say, when I go back, sir, in the beginning was the word, right? There's different ways. It's first speak it, right? Then what word, right? Then it's the written word, right? Then it's the word of action, right? All of these are actions, right?
Right.
When I think of it, everything is energy, y'all. When you're making these posts, that's energy out into the world. Right? That's energy. That's currency. That's a current, right? When you're donating, that's a current. When you're using your money, those are all energy. So there's different forms of energy. Networking is an energy. Listening these are all energies. These are all actions. So when I think of what does it really mean, right, to move in the way of action, right? There are pieces that I've written. There are pieces that I've written back in 2015, 2016 that just might be discovered. I was doing this work. If you look down at my Instagram page, I only started coming on Instagram. I came on Instagram when I was in college because the administration at City College of New York shut down the Morales Shakur Center, the place where I was being active when I was being an activist, right? I was the president of the union, and they shut it down to open up a business center. So that place was a bridge between the school, the students, and the community. The Black Panther Party used to come on, like everyone used to come on campus, and we used to use that space to organize out of it because it was a free space. Asada went to the City College of New York, and on that sign at City College, it said this place was won through struggle. So what we did was we formed a coalition and we went against the institution. We started publishing stuff in the campus newspaper. We started the paper. We started to take over the building. Where if you go all the way down to my Instagram account, you will see security guards in front of City College in New York, like 8 guards, police officers guarding the entrance. You have to have an ID to get in because they didn't want the community members to come in. You will see how we took over the campus, right? There are some folks who are my friends who didn't graduate that year, right? Because they were in the struggle. They had to go and petition to the board, and they didn't graduate to a year or 2 years down the line, right? And part of it is, right, when we think of that, these are all truth tellers. So whatever you do, however you do it, be a truth teller, right? However you do it, everything is energy, y'all. So however you do it, if it's supporting through your finances, if it's supporting through writing, through speaking, teaching, preaching, I don't care what you do, right? Even if you're playing the drums, Dr. King said, if you're playing the drums, if you're a drum major, be a drum major for justice, right? Come on, y'all. And I'm a drum major for justice.
Come on, man. Come on, dog. But listen, man, you done said a whole bunch of bars in here. So listen. And this is perfect because I know in 30 minutes after we're done, you're going to hop on a Clubhouse, and I see D's in there. So shout out to D. If you don't know about Black Girls Teach, please make sure you tap into Black Girls Teach. They're doing some incredible things in that organization. But I know that you and D are going to be talking about this. So I don't want you to put too much of that sauce, in here, because we gotta get it into Clubhouse. You know what I mean?
Listen, I stay ready, as Deidre would say. So I'm gonna give you the same 100% that I bring to every platform, right? And
I don't doubt it.
this is my gift, right? I walk in my purpose. So when we think about the universe, right? There's no limit to the universe. And we think about universal consciousness and spiritual consciousness and these things, right? There's no limit, right? So though I appreciate it, I'm calling on universal wisdom and universal consciousness. So we're good.
Absolutely. So I see you're rocking the Teachers for Good Trouble hoodie. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you mentioned, we were able to get people to sign the petition to end standardized testing. And we still need folks to do that. So if you haven't done so already, please make sure you head over to teachersforgoodtrouble.org and sign a petition. It's still active. Even though the rallies have stopped, the work is still happening. And actually, it's only beginning.
Yep.
See, you don't realize that the rallies that happened on December 15th, the day without teachers, that was the harbinger for what's going to happen in 2021 and beyond. So I think that's something that we need to make sure that we highlight, while we're on, because I think sometimes what happens is we make a lot of noise.
Yep.
We have rallies, we picket, and then once it's over, we revert back to old habits. We revert back to old behaviors that put us in a position of subordinates, where we feel like we're powerless and we can't do anything. But we have to change that for 2021. So thinking about just what we were able to do within the past month at this point or so, what do you believe are our next steps for this movement? And how can we continue to galvanize more folks to tap in? Because there's still some people out there who, I don't know why at this point, they're still like, should I tap in, or is this a good idea? So how can we have people, how can we call in those folks?
Yeah, I think that's an amazing question, right? And I think, we at Teachers for Good Trouble, our vision is to demand freedom from standardized testing, right? And our mission is we are educators focused on reforming schools to build safe, nurturing, and justice-driven school communities by eliminating standardized testing as a tool to measure performance during a pandemic. However, I think going forward, right, I think that the apparatus is moving towards canceling standardized testing, right? But it's also moving towards making sure that every kid and every family has free hotspot, right? Free Wi-Fi, free hotspots, free laptops, right? Because the educational inequality in this country, right? Most folks talk about the achievement gap, right? Students can't achieve, but it's not an achievement gap. It's really an opportunity gap, right?
Yes.
The lack of opportunity and resources. But what most folks don't get, it's not just the opportunity gap, right? There's an information gap. So where the opportunities are, how did you get there? There's an opportunity gap in Brownsville, but there's an information gap as well. And the South, there's an information gap. And that information gap is going to widen because there's a technological gap. There's already there's a gap. So how do we fill in the gaps in a space of virtual learning, right? And we think about inside of the pandemic, right? And virtual learning, we need to fill in the gap by making sure everyone just has the basic needs. And the basic needs is a laptop and hotspots, right? Like free access to Wi-Fi. That is a basic need right now, right? I think like this time period, we need to really push for that in our homes. So when I really think about it, right? When I think about this apparatus, free, and teachers too need free laptops and free hotspot. They should be paying our hotspot all year round. Let's come to it, right? But I think that's what we need to move towards, right? Everyone can get with that. Do you agree? Like, it's like when you think of hotspots and laptops, that's like students needing pen and paper, pencils and paper, pen, pencils and papers. It's just what they need right now, right? It's what we need. So, but the issues is Schools have been under-resourced for decades.
Come on now.
Decades. Why do we have to finance our classes on GoFundMe?
Or donors choose.
Our donors choose. Like, why do we have to do that? Like, and I tell folks, and usually teachers, students, we have to go outside. We have to, like, one of the things we were preached to in Brownsville is, like, I was always told, go to college, get an education. But with that go to college and get an education, it was leave the community to get the resources and opportunities that's not in there. And I'm tired of people saying that. We need to stop that. We need to start asking critical questions. Why aren't those resources in the communities to begin with? Why aren't they to begin with? So we need to start asking critical questions, because when you send folks out, it's like scapegoating the system in these communities that are based off these schools that are based off the degradation of our people. You're letting them off the hook. You're outsourcing students, and you're like, folks have to go to this gifted school or go to this school to get opportunities, but why aren't they there to begin with? So when we talk about laptops and hotspots, which is one of our demands, one of our 3 demands, right? We're thinking about closing the opportunity gap and the information gap and pulling resources into the communities, because with those laptops, you can start launching coding programs. We know that internet is the future, right? You can move towards entrepreneurship. Like, it's a whole change that we have to make. We have to move from consumers to producers. We have to move these things forward, right? And that's the only way. So when we talk about that, we're really talking about the age-old question is like, why don't our students have the resources they need to do the work that they need? Why don't they have the books? Now everything's online. So when you give them a laptop, you're giving them access to the universe. You're giving them access to information. You're closing that gap. And I think we really need to close the gap. But then technology is also a skill. It's a skill. So we not only have to give it to them, and then it's like, oh, what do I do with it, right? We have to teach them how to use the technology for their liberation, to raise money, to advocate for themselves, to move, to learn for themselves, right? Carter G. Woodson, and I'm gonna stop here. Carter G. Woodson said there's 2 types of educations. One that you give to yourself, and one that's given to you. The one that you get for yourself is far greater than the one given to you. And we have to teach students how to educate themselves with the real knowledge of their history, their culture, entrepreneurship, coding, and to really align with their gifts, right? Most of the time we're telling students to go into a field or go into a place where their gifts are doesn't work for them. Their gifts, we're telling the students to use their gifts to go into, we always say your gifts will make room for you. Gifts make room for you, right? But we're telling students to use their gifts to go into a room filled with white supremacy. Like, what room are we making? What are we using our gifts? What rooms are we moving into? What rooms are we using our technology to move into, right? So I hope that's one of the demands that we really need to push on.
Oh man, you just said a whole lot, and just speaking on just why things are the way they are, and just current conditions. We have to go back to who's making the rules.
Yep.
Think about Common Core.
Yep.
You know, I had Dr. Muhammad on the show, Dr. Goldie Muhammad. So if you don't have Cultivating Genius, make sure you go get that book.
Yep.
And she talked about the fact that the Common Core standards doesn't speak to the historical brilliance of Black and brown people, right? It's all focused on skills, assessing skills, you know, and then just thinking about this opportunity and this information gap. If you don't have access to that, I think that's purposeful. We know that's purposeful because guess what? You go to the affluent neighborhoods, they all have that. That's the norm out there. And they have easier access economically to the bag than we do, right? And then there was another question I was going to ask you, but I'm just going to throw it out there because you're a history teacher.
Yeah.
This. Listen, we live in a country where a U.S. senator passed legislation to stop schools from teaching the history of our country, America's original sin.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to say is he's in Arkansas. His last name is Cotton. And his first name is Tom. So I'm going to put a bar out there. You can rate it. So you got some Uncle Toms who are supporting him, and they want us to keep picking cotton.
Oh, come on.
Senator Tom Cotton, man. And it's crazy. The fact that it actually went through Congress and people voted on this is absurd. And then also the fact that our soon-to-be former president put out an executive order for federal programs to stop to cease and desist anti-racist diversity training. Those are all the signs you need to know, and it should have come down to that point for us to get there. But so I guess for me, I just go back to the freedom schools movement.
Yeah.
I think we have to just go back to that, whether we do a homeschooling type of thing, or it's just a case where, all right, we keep talking about building our schools, let's build our own schools. And I see our brother Principal Ra doing his thing in Los Angeles. Doing that. But I want to know your thoughts. How can we just collectively get to that mindset of, you know what? Let's get out of this paradigm and just do our own thing.
Yeah, I think that when I was really thinking about it, I know that for me, I'm always thinking about, I always think about law, right? What are natural laws, right? And, and I always use this Newton's law of physics, right? And one of the rules is an object in motion stays in motion until combated by equal or opposite force, right? And when you look at part of that silencing of our voices in the curriculum, and started with the counterintelligence of J. Edgar Hoover and how he dismantled the Black Panther Party, right? Because we did the pro, right? It's called counterintelligence program. It's not called the intelligence, like the FBI is called the Federal Bureau of Intelligence. However, COINTELPRO is a counterintelligence program. That means that there was an intelligentsia that existed way before. There was an intelligentsia that existed, and they had to counter it, right? Because they're right. An object in motion stays in motion until combated by equal or opposite or more powerful force. We are that more powerful force, but we usually don't see it like that, right? We think that they're the powerful. No, they have systematically, like you said, they have systematically used their power to break us down. Even most folks think of the Brown versus Board of Education, that 1954 civil rights case, right? And they think of it as a great upheaval legislation. It's celebrated throughout the country.
Yes.
And I'm like, what did it really do? Like, what did it really do, right? And I asked my students, hey, what's the significance of Brown versus Board of Education? And they always tell me, they say, oh, it helped desegregate the schools. And I say to them, okay, we're in the South Bronx. I was in Brownsville. So where are all the white students in this class? Where are they? And they look. And they look, and I'm like, they're like, well, Christopher's white. I'm like, Christopher's Puerto Rican. No, right? And they're like, well, it's none here, right? And then they look at it and they're like, oh, well, we don't know what it did. And what it did was it said separate, like it said, it took off the separate but equal doctrine. Now, separate could be equal, but separate can't be equal under white supremacy. The issue with separate but equal under Jim Crow was that when we think of it is, I'm gonna just use bathrooms, right? 2 separate bathrooms. Is that white folks, right? The white supremacist structure had control of both bathrooms. So when you think of it, you'll go into the white bathroom, right? And it was all clean and pristine, good water fountain, all of this stuff. And when you go into the black bathroom, it said for black people, coloreds, and dogs and animals. But y'all know black people, indigenous, black and brown folks are part of the cleanest people ever. So those bathrooms weren't dirty because because we made them that way. They were like that because white folks controlled the conditions. They controlled the conditions. They controlled the power. They did that purposely, right? However, when they desegregated schools, they still controlled the conditions, and they took up more for our black leaders, black teachers, black principals, black schools, and they shipped them into these white schools where they had to get the opportunities from. But really what they did was they created legislation and they created a whole bunch of things to not just control the white districts, but to control the black and brown districts too. And the only way they can get money or opportunities in those school systems is now for a charter school or someone else to come in that school is like, we have to come and help these people for a problem that the white power structure created. And I call it poverty pimping, right? That's what you're doing. You're a poverty pimp. And I think of NOLA in Louisiana. When the Hurricane Katrina came, NOLA is an understudied case. They use a natural disaster to take over that community. I think 100% or at least 95 to 100% of NOLA is now charter school ran.
Yeah, that's right.
So
like Katrina.
If you look at it, it happened after Hurricane Katrina. They used Hurricane Katrina to take over these failing schools. But why are these schools failing? Because they don't have the resources. They don't have the things. So really, what we have to do is really control the resources, really control the opportunities, control the information, control the means of production. And that's what the freedom schools did. That's what the Black Panther Party did. That's what they did. They controlled everything around it. They said, we're not going to go and we're not going to go and send our kids into the mouths of the shark. We're not going to go ship them there, right? And I think those are kind of things we really have to look at. We have to really look at a historical analysis of where we are now, why we are here, what got us here, and really think about what can get us out of there, right? And right now, if we're not careful, the same thing that happened through Hurricane Katrina, where they use a natural disaster to take over our communities, is the same thing that's going to happen during this global pandemic. There's a real wealth grab going on. There's a house grab going on. And then there's a school grab going on. We don't talk about we talk about ICE. There's a children grab going on. We talk about, there's a lot of grabs going on here. Even if you look at the foster care rates during the pandemic, you would see that more kids are going to foster care right now. And I'm a product of foster care, right? You see more kids are going to foster care now because their parents the pandemic have moved them into a place of poverty where they can't take care of their kids. And then they sat on a stimulus check for 9 months, right? So there are kids in the womb who have to born into a society that said, hey, your life is only worth $600.
Wow.
And when we really think about the circumstances that kids are being born into, and what our apparatus, there's about to be a real, watch it, y'all, watch it, y'all. There's a whole bunch of grabs going over it. More kids on foster care, and I say this: poverty should never be a reason why a mother loses their child. But that's what's happening. Poverty is never a reason why a school should be taken over, but that's what's happening. Poverty is never a reason why not paying their rent, that a person should be forced on the street, but that's what's happening. And they're using natural disasters. They're using pandemic, and we've been in a pandemic, the pandemic of racism, the pandemic of sexism, the pandemic of these things that are coming against us, right? Those are pandemic. You know how diabolical this racism thing is? Do you know how diabolical it is to tell a people that during the global pandemic, gave you $600 is diabolical? It's insidious, right? And we as a people have to wake up, and we really have to push back. So I think that I teach 1619 in my class. I teach it fearlessly, right? And when you really think about 1619 and its government really started in 1619, most people call it the school to prison pipeline. It's not the school to prison pipeline. You know what it is, Kwame? It's the plantation to school to prison pipeline.
Come on, man. Come on, dog. Come on. Oh,
it's
man.
The plantation to school of prison pipeline.
Yes.
Because if you look at it, most of the schools, even if you think of higher education, most of the schools, when they were destroying the plantation, when we think about being abolitionists, right? When the abolitionists was, we think of Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, all these folks, when they were destroying the plantation system, the planters, right? They saw it. They saw it coming, right? The folks who control the means of production on the plantation, they saw it. You know where they start to invest their plantation money is? You know what the Uncle Toms and the cotton picker, the cotton growers started to invest their money in?
Right.
Schools, higher education, Harvard, Georgetown, Yale, all of these things they start because they said, this is going to be the new way that we create opportunities for our people. This is the new way that we lock people out of access and opportunities. So that's what they did. They grabbed all of their money and they put them and they created these schools. And then they said, who can get to these schools? White, blonde hair, blue eyes, mostly men. Then they let white women in, right? And they locked the gates down. And then they control the vote. And then they literacy tests, poll taxes, all of these things they put in place so we get in. And then when they had control of the education system, when they had control of a higher learning, then they desegregated. Then they desegregated the school system. And then they took over the other learning. They control the knowledge, y'all. They control, and my mentor said, whoever controls the images controls your self-esteem, your self-respect, your self-development. Whoever controls the history controls the vision. They control the vision of our people.
Yes.
There's a whole systematic apparatus, y'all, and that's what we need to combat it against. We are the intelligentsia.
Right. No, that's what it is, though. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if you think about the Berlin Conference, how they divided up Africa, that's what's happening to our people here in this country.
Yep.
We're being redlined for different reasons, and that's why we're not able to come together as one to deal with these issues because, you know, of the way we're being conditioned.
Yep.
And then you also mentioned this idea of fear. You said that you teach the 1619 Project fearlessly.
Yeah. Well,
I'm going to take one of your sayings. Action cures fear. Action cures fear. See, I've been listening, man. No, we got to stop being scared.
Yep.
And that's what hinders us from doing what's right because we're so concerned about these different metrics that in the end don't really matter. We get concerned about the test scores. We get concerned about these other accountability measures that don't truly hold the people who should be held accountable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we have to start with us, the self.
Yeah.
And then we can get to a place where we can, as you say, lock arms and start collaborating together to challenge the status quo. But it's going to be an incremental process.
Mm-hmm.
But we all have to be engaged in that. And I think once we start to do more of that at the micro level, it's going to lead to the changes that we're desiring for our Black and brown people, which will impact and influence and all people in the end, right? But I know you got to go, so we're going to run through these last few questions real quick. So
I do want to point Dina's thing out. She said, and how can we teach students and children to do the right things when we hide truth from them?
Oh, yeah.
And part of a truth is our action. Kids look at more what you, right? And I tell people the biggest gap in the world is between your mouth and your foot. What you say and what you do.
Yes.
Kids learn through observation. They learn through observation. They observational learners. So you may be saying something, you may be doing something else. So your actions, your fight against the powers that be, what you're doing to move things forward in terms of action on behalf of our students, families, our teachers, that's where kids are. That's the example they're looking at. So then they'll look at your example, right? So when students were seeing me do Teacher for Good Trouble, they was like, yo, go ahead, teacher, students be on my live and things of that nature, because they knew that if I'm going to risk it all, risking it all on behalf of them, right? And then I teach them to speak up against the powers that be. Even me. Kids, my first year of teaching high school, I'm gonna be brief. My first year of teaching high school, kids boycotted my class like 2 months in. They did a sit-out. They set out my class. They had signs. Saying, we're not going back, and no grading, no representation, right? They felt like I was being an unfair grader. They felt like I wasn't challenged. They felt like, because we had these things in my school called attainments, which is skills. They felt like I wasn't given enough opportunities to show their brilliance. Mm-hmm. They said I was being stingy. They even at the talent show, they made up this song about me. They said, Amalu doesn't grade, so he shouldn't get paid.
What? Get out of here.
Amalu doesn't grade, so he shouldn't get paid. At the whole school talent show. And I appreciated them for it. When I saw it, I didn't try to silence their voice. I didn't stop them down. I said, yes, this is what I was trying to teach you. It's not okay to teach about the American Revolution.
Come on now.
Okay to say no taxation, give me liberty or give me death. And all John Henry, all this other stuff. Boston Tea Party and the massacre, all this stuff. It's not okay to teach that. But when it comes to rebellions in the streets, when it comes to push back against power in your classroom, that you're going to be like the British and try to stomp it out. That's why the 1619 Project is important, because we know that it's not okay to even teach that time period or just teach slavery without teaching about Nat Turner and David Walker and Harriet Tubman and Denmark Vesey, right? Toussaint Louverture, right? It's not okay, right? And I think, or even teaching about the historical past. So we're really teaching them through our actions, right? Our actions are the things that are going to cure fear in our classroom and cure fear in our students, and has pushed this thing forward. When we talk about John Lewis, he said, we need to make good trouble necessary trouble. And I'm telling everyone, all good trouble is necessary trouble.
Come on now.
Necessary trouble, and show your students, be a model to society. That's the real thing. I don't care who you pray to. They all made necessary trouble.
No, you're right. But man, that part right there where you cheer them on, I want people to think about that for a second. If it was somebody else, they would have reacted to it in a totally different manner. Totally. They would have told those students that they were insubordinate. They probably would have tried to, get them suspended. Or even expelled. Or get some other extreme offense. But you, my friend, you saw this as a teachable moment. And also, what you did was teaching without teaching, if that makes sense. So when I say teach without teaching, you weren't in front of the classroom giving a lecture and dialoguing with students and you're on the whiteboard. No, you were, they did what we call, well, what edu speakers say is experiential learning.
Yep.
That was experiential learning that was happening right there. But here's the thing. Some folks who are so caught up in, you know, the letter of the land will never interpret it as such. And that's the problem with education right now, bro. That's a problem.
And I'm gonna say one quick last thing. Do you know that I do project-based learning? And you asked me what's next for Teachers with Good Trouble, is we're trying to like look at alternative assessments, right? Like project-based learning. The standard of project-based learning is learning by doing. Learning by doing. Right. That's it. Learning by doing. No one has you learn how to tie your shoes, your ABCs. It was through repetition. You just had to do it, right? To tie your shoes. And I think that when we think about learning by doing and the project, right? When we think about the project, America is a project. It's a failed project, but it's still a project, right? When we think about the revolution from a democracy, from a monarchy to a democracy, right? That was a revolution, right? When we think about the founding of Tuskegee Institute by Booker T. Washington, right? Being the first, that was a project, right? Students built Tuskegee. Go back and it's a case study. Students built Tuskegee University. Putting students at the center of the classroom and the curriculum. That was a project. When we think about the Black Lives Matter movement or the Black Freedom movement, or this is a project. But how did this is learning by doing? When we think about TikTok, when we think about all of these things, when we think about Instagram, Facebook, these are all projects. And what we learned how to do, there was no manual for Instagram. There was no manual. We just learned by doing, right? And kids have the power to learn by doing. When we think about soul food, when we think about the blues, when we think about jazz, when we think about hip hop, these are all innovations that people learn by doing. You see what I'm saying?
Can I ask you something, brother? And this is a rhetorical question. If we're able to use social media for project-based learning, then why is it that we have school policies that prohibit students from using cell phones during instructional time?
Right? And that's the thing, right? I had this thing. If you're really concerned about schools, they really call about education, why are we so worried about hoodies, sneakers, right? And clothing? What does that have to do with it, right? But you have to understand that it's about profit. And our students, right? Some of our students, right? And even folks, you think they can't read and write, right? But they can see through the lines and read what's right. Right? They know through your actions. And most of the time, when we talk about education, most folks are trying to move up into the education space. They're trying to move up in the education space. They go from the teacher to the principals, right? But for me, and they both oppress students, but for me, the lesser of two evils is still evil. It's still evil. And I tell folks, it's like, and that's why I love Kwanzaa, right? I tell folks, don't leave the house without your principles. Because it's always going to be about principle. How your character, how is your consciousness, and what are you doing for students? How are you centering them in the classroom? So yeah.
No, man, and I think this will be a perfect place to end it, because I know you gotta jump on to the next thing. But before you go, man, please let people know how they can connect with you, because people need to hear this. People need to hear your words, brother. So let them know how they can link up with you on social media.
Yeah, I am the Insightful Teacher at Instagram. At the Insightful Teacher, you can see it right there. My name, Rakim Jenkins, RAKIM JENKINS at Clubhouse. I will be doing a Clubhouse later with Black Girls Teach, Deidre from Black Girls Teach. And we're really going to be talking about how education has become a toxic environment, and stop normalizing toxic stuff inside of the classroom, right? So we're going to have a candid conversation on teacher burnout, activism, and reclaiming your power to preserve your place, right? And I'm also doing a master class on January 9th, right? It's called You Are the Asset, Navigating School Politics and Reclaiming Your Power. And it's a virtual master class. And what we've seen as, for all the teachers out there, most of the time, when we're disruptors, when we're speaking truth to power, we're seen as the problem, right?
Right.
But when folks is like, you are the asset. You are the one. You are the one we've been waiting for. So if you check me out, you can check me out on Insightful, the Insightful Teacher. I go live every Tuesday. I've been going live every day, but Instagram Live is where we're at. I'll be launching a book club in January with Black Girls Teach. I'm going to want to do More Than Survive, Abolitionist Teaching and Educating Freedom by Bettina Love. And we'll be reading this book, and it's going to be amazing. So you can just follow me on Instagram at The Insightful Teacher. If you're on here, Rakim Jenkins, my Facebook, just come through, and I look forward to y'all coming. I'm going to say one thing.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Before we dip, I love James Baldwin. And James Baldwin said, God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time. And that was written in the 1960s. This is the next time that James Baldwin was talking about. There's not going to be a next time. Don't look for a next time. It is this time. This is the time. Seize the time. Seize the opportunity. Seize the day. Because we keep on thinking as people that we're going to get another time. There's no time better than the present. We're looking for a sign. We're looking for alignment. Alignment is not in the past or the future. It's in the present. So you are the asset. You are the best present. You are the gift to the world. And we need to start telling that to people because we need to start walking in it. So when I think about Nia, purpose. When I think about purpose, y'all, I think about we were all sent to this plane with a purpose, a sacred mission, a calling. And there's someone right now who is in need of the gift you have. It is time for you to step into the rooms that God has already prepared you for. And the reason why I do what I do is for my students and community. And for that young boy, that 5th grader in Brownsville, that 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader, 9th grader in Brownsville, Brooklyn, who was sitting, who needed someone to really, really uplift them. We are the people we've been waiting for. Network across, lock arms, and really let's get this done. I love y'all, and I thank y'all.
Man, Rakim, man, this is the perfect way to end 2020. Perfect way to end it. And I appreciate you, brother, for coming on the podcast today. And I know this is not going to be the last time we break bread together. We're going to keep this thing going to 2021, moving forward.
Thank you for creating this space. Thank you for just all that you do, right? Thank you for really being an advocate for and knowing that everyone has value, no matter how much followers they have, no matter how much money they have, knowing that we all are making change in waves in our individual sector of the world. And I want to thank you for bringing me on this platform and the voices that you've had on this platform, because you are doing the good work. And I know the ancestors are saying to you, job well done, my good and faithful servant. So I look forward to breaking bread with you, bro. I look forward to sharing different platforms with you, bro. And I just want to thank you for how you're showing up in the world.
Man, I appreciate you, man. But go ahead and be great on Clubhouse. Keep on being great on Clubhouse, man. I'm gonna join that convo in a second. But Rakim, man, thank you, man. And I'm gonna see you in a little bit.
Yeah, I'll be on IG Live first with Channing and Felicia, and then I'm going to Clubhouse at 10:15. So,
all right.
See you.
All right, I'll be there, man. All right, man.
Peace.
Peace out. All right, folks. Man, that was just a powerful episode with Rakim Amalu Jenkins. Please make sure you follow him at The Insightful Teacher on Instagram. He's doing his IG Lives every day for Kwanzaa, but you can catch him every Tuesday on IG Live. So make sure you check him out, get you some wisdom. And I don't have any other announcements. So I'm going to go ahead and just end the podcast here. And regardless of what holiday you celebrate, or even if you don't celebrate a holiday, I wish you many blessings as we enter this new year. And wherever you are in the world, good night, good afternoon, good morning. We're going to do this again another time in 2021. All right, folks. Peace out. We will see you next year.